Do you feel perfectly healthy? No headaches? No dizziness? No obvious symptoms? But did you know 1 in 3 people with high blood pressure have no idea they have it until it's too late? This video will reveal 10 silent signs of high blood pressure, small warning signs that may be the earliest red flags before your heart, brain, or kidneys cry out with a stroke or heart attack. Even worse, you may have already experienced one of these symptoms, but ignored it, thinking it was just something normal. Stay until the end of the video to uncover the most dangerous sign, the one most doctors don't mention during routine checkups. Did you know there's a killer living inside your body, causing no pain, leaving no scars, and staying completely silent? But one day, it could steal your vision, paralyze half your body, or stop your heart in just seconds. That killer is high blood pressure, a condition that seems harmless, but silently kills over 670,000 Americans every year through heart attacks, strokes, and kidney failure. It's not an exaggeration to call it the silent killer. You can't see it, you can't feel it, but it's quietly destroying your body. According to the World Health Organization, WHO, over 1.28 billion people worldwide are currently living with high blood pressure. Even more alarming, nearly half of them don't even know they have it. In the United States, the CDC reported in 2023 that about 122 million American adults, that's 1 in 2 adults, have high blood pressure. Among them, only 24% have their blood pressure under control. Over 30 million people over the age of 55 have never been properly diagnosed with dangerous levels. What does that mean? You might walk every day, you eat clean, sleep well, you feel just fine. But your blood pressure might be quietly leading you toward a stroke without you even knowing it. High blood pressure doesn't scream, it whispers. It's not like other diseases that announce themselves with pain. Blood pressure symptoms are subtle, vague, and easy to ignore. A brief headache, some fatigue after lunch, a bit of ringing in your ears that fades quickly, and you brush it off with the familiar phrase, "It's just age catching up with me." That's the trap. Because when the symptoms become obvious, the damage has already begun. The cost of ignoring the signs? Just look at the numbers. Nearly 800,000 strokes occur each year in the U.S., and nearly 60% are linked to high blood pressure. Over 70% of heart failure patients aged 60 plus have a history of long-term hypertension. According to the American Heart Association, AHA, high blood pressure increases the risk of chronic kidney failure by 4 times. No one ends up in the ER because of a little fatigue. But far too many never return home from their first stroke. Here's what you need to understand. Your body always sends signals. You've just stopped listening. This video isn't here to scare you. We're here to bring you back into control with knowledge, awareness, and action. High blood pressure doesn't wait for you to be ready. It waits for you to be distracted. And in the next section, we'll help you decode 10 early symptoms, signs that seem harmless, but could be the most important warning bells your body is ringing. Stay until the end of the video, because symptom number 10 is the one almost everyone overlooks. And it's the very reason high blood pressure is considered the most dangerous silent killer of our time. Your body is whispering, but are you listening? 1. Severe headaches. When your brain is being squeezed, and you don't even know it. Imagine tying a balloon with a rubber band. The more you inflate it, the tighter the band squeezes. That's how high blood pressure silently compresses the blood vessels in your brain. Most people think headaches come from stress, bad weather, or lack of sleep. But for people with high blood pressure, especially older adults, a severe headache may be the brain's first cry for help. According to the Journal of Headache and Pain, 2024, individuals with a diastolic blood pressure over 100 millimeters of mercury have a 42% higher risk of migraines. Why? Because elevated pressure can cause fluid leakage into brain tissue, raising intracranial pressure and leading to a hammer-like headache, one that painkillers won't fix. These headaches may be accompanied by blurred vision, nausea, dizziness, a feeling like your head is about to explode. Even worse, it could signal a hypertensive crisis, a medical emergency that can lead to a stroke within hours if untreated. Young people may ignore the pain after a pill, but if you're over 55, especially with fluctuating blood pressure, you cannot afford to dismiss it. 2. Blurred vision, when light is strangled by tightening blood flow. Vision, the precious gift already worn by age, can be taken away completely if you don't watch for signs of high blood pressure. The eyes contain millions of tiny blood vessels. When blood pressure rises too high, it can damage the fragile capillaries in the retina, the part of the eye responsible for sensing light. This condition is called hypertensive retinopathy, and it doesn't hurt, but it destroys your vision silently. Warning signs include blurry vision, like looking through fog, double vision, loss of peripheral vision, dark spots or flashes of light. According to the Journal of Human Hypertension, 2023, up to 70% of people with high blood pressure for over 10 years show signs of retinal vessel degeneration. As the damage progresses, optic disc swelling can occur, and you may lose your sight permanently. You don't want to wake up one morning and see only gray. Let blurred vision be a warning sign, not a final sentence. 3. Fatigue, when your heart is straining just to keep you awake. No one likes feeling sluggish, but for many older adults, it becomes normal. However, when fatigue becomes your default state, your body may be breaking down from the inside. Every heartbeat is a delivery truck carrying oxygen and nutrients to your cells. But if the engine, your heart, grows weak, thousands of cells begin to starve. High blood pressure overworks the heart, causing the left ventricle to enlarge. Pumping efficiency drops, oxygen delivery falters, and you feel exhausted. Kidneys also suffer. When they stop filtering properly, toxins build up, making you feel like you're carrying weights inside your body. According to the CDC, 2023, people over 60 with uncontrolled hypertension are 2.5 times more likely to experience chronic fatigue than those with normal blood pressure. Fatigue isn't just aging. It's a desperate letter from your heart and kidneys begging for help. 4. Chest pain, when your heart pounds out of fear, not love. It feels like someone placed a heavy rock on your chest. Pressure, shortness of breath, cold sweat. You sit still, hoping it passes, but next time it might not. High blood pressure forces the heart to pump harder. Meanwhile, the coronary arteries, which feed the heart, narrow due to plaque buildup. This can lead to angina, chest pain from lack of oxygen. Heart attack. According to Pain Reports, 2019, people with uncontrolled hypertension are 3 times more likely to die within 24 hours after a heart attack. Don't wait until your heart stops to finally hear its call. 5. Shortness of breath, when every breath becomes a battle. Have you ever climbed a few stairs and felt like you'd just run a marathon? Or had to lie on your side at night because lying flat made you feel like drowning? It's not just getting older. It could be a clear sign of heart failure caused by high blood pressure. When the left side of your heart thickens from pumping under constant pressure, its ability to squeeze efficiently drops. Blood backs up into the lungs, leading to pulmonary edema, where the air sacs, alveoli, fill with fluid instead of air. It feels like you're trying to inhale oxygen, but all you breathe in is panic. A study in the Journal of the American Heart Association, 2023, found that acute pulmonary edema is the second most common complication during a hypertensive crisis, just after stroke. Shortness of breath during activity, trouble breathing while lying down, or gasping during sleep are major warning signs. If you suddenly start coughing up pink frothy sputum, call emergency services immediately. When you can no longer control your breath, your heart may already be losing control too. 6. Nosebleeds, when fragile vessels surrender to pressure. A small trickle of blood from your nose might make you think it's just dryness, nothing serious. But if your nosebleeds are frequent, hard to stop, and come with dizziness or headaches, take caution. The nose contains hundreds of tiny capillaries, extremely sensitive to pressure. When blood pressure spikes, the force can rupture these vessels, causing sudden bleeding. According to JAMA Otolaryngology, Head and Neck Surgery, 2020, people with high blood pressure are 35% more likely to be hospitalized for severe nosebleeds than those with normal pressure. What's dangerous here? The nosebleed isn't the cause, it's the consequence. If the pressure is strong enough to break vessels in the nose, your brain, eyes, heart, and kidneys are under threat too. Don't see blood in your nose as just blood. See it as a warning from your entire circulatory system. 7. Nausea, vomiting, when your brain is overwhelmed and tries to purge. Nausea and vomiting are often blamed on the stomach, but for people with high blood pressure, especially older adults, it may signal brain swelling due to elevated pressure. When blood pressure rises too high, fluid can seep into the brain, causing cerebral edema, which irritates the vomiting center, area postrema, in the brainstem. The result, unexplained nausea, dizziness, or continuous vomiting. Some people describe it as feeling seasick without moving. According to Journal of Clinical Medicine, 2023, nearly 20% of patients in hypertensive crisis report nausea or vomiting, especially when combined with headaches, blurry vision, or confusion. The key isn't just to take anti-nausea meds. It's to check your blood pressure immediately, because if brain swelling is the cause, delaying treatment could lead to coma or stroke. 8. Heart palpitations. When your heartbeat races while you're sitting still. You're at rest, not moving, but your heart is racing, chest is thumping, and you feel a strange flutter. It's not emotion, it's pressure. Your heart is working under stress and starting to lose rhythm. Chronic high blood pressure causes thickening of the heart muscle, especially in the left ventricle. This interferes with the heart's electrical system, leading to atrial fibrillation, AFib, unexplained rapid heartbeat, palpitations even at rest. Journal of the American Heart Association, 2020, found proper blood pressure control can reduce AFib risk by 27%. Random heart palpitations aren't harmless. They're a red alert from your heart's conductor losing its beat. 9. Ringing ears, tinnitus, when your blood vessels start making noise. Have you ever heard buzzing, whooshing, or humming in your ears, even in total silence? No, it's not your imagination. It could be the sound of blood pulsing through your inner ear vessels at high pressure. The inner ear is highly sensitive to blood flow. When blood vessels constrict, the flow becomes noisy, causing a ringing or pressure-like sensation. According to Frontiers in Neurology, 2022, people with high blood pressure are 38% more likely to experience tinnitus, especially those over 60. Besides mechanical causes, chronic stress from hypertension can also activate the sympathetic nervous system, triggering stress-induced tinnitus. That's not summer cicadas. That's not the wind. It's your own blood, crying out in silence. 10. Hand tremors. When your nervous system shakes with silent panic. Do your hands tremble slightly when holding a glass of water? Is your handwriting less steady than before? Pause and observe. It may not just be aging hands. It could be your nervous system misfiring due to elevated adrenaline triggered by chronic hypertension or internal stress. Journal of Hypertension, 2016, tracked over 700 older adults and found those with persistent mild tremors were twice as likely to develop hypertension within 5 years. Tremors won't kill you today, but they're the first knock on the door, a sign of approaching cardiovascular trouble. Transition to the solution section. You've just uncovered 10 early signs, silent yet dangerous. The good news, if you recognize even a few of these symptoms in yourself, you still have time to change course. And in the next part, we'll guide you through specific, natural, and safe actions to identify, monitor, and reverse your risk before it's too late. You've learned the risks. You've heard the warning bells. Now, it's time to act. High blood pressure doesn't have to be a life sentence. In many cases, it can be controlled or even reversed if you take the right steps at the right time. And here's the good news. You don't need to start with medication. Many people, especially those over 55, have succeeded simply by changing their daily habits. 1. Monitor your blood pressure, the mirror that reflects your inner health. You can't control what you don't measure. That's why the first and most important step is to check your blood pressure regularly at home. Each reading is like looking into a mirror that reflects the condition of your blood vessels. According to the American Heart Association, AHA, just 3 to 5 home measurements per week can reduce the risk of hospitalization by 30% due to heart complications. Quick tips. Measure in the morning and evening. Rest 5 minutes beforehand. Sit upright, stay silent during measurement. Log your results to track trends. If your reading is consistently above 130 over 80 millimeters of mercury, consult your doctor. 2. When to see a doctor. High blood pressure isn't always an emergency, but ignoring the right moment to seek help can be fatal. You should visit a doctor if your BP stays above 140 over 90 for 2 straight weeks. You experience symptoms like headaches, blurred vision, chest pressure, or shortness of breath. You have a history of heart disease, stroke, or diabetes. If your BP is over 180 over 110, and you also experience severe headache, chest pain, numbness or weakness on one side, call 911 immediately. This may be a hypertensive crisis. 3.5 natural ways to lower blood pressure at home. No prescriptions needed to get started. Here are 5 science-backed, senior-friendly lifestyle strategies you can do at home. 1. Cut back on salt. Break the noose around your arteries. Salt is a major trigger for hypertension. The average American consumes 3,400 milligrams sodium per day, nearly twice the recommended limit. Goal: less than or equal to 1,500 milligrams per day. Simple changes: avoid canned processed foods. Flavor meals with herbs, lemon, or pepper instead of salt. 2. Walk daily. Each step lightens the load on your heart. Just 30 minutes of walking daily can lower BP by 5 to 8 millimeters of mercury. Harvard Medical School. Tips for adults 55 plus. Walk in the morning or evening. Pair with calming music or podcasts. Focus on consistency, not intensity. 3. Sleep well. The free medicine for your heart. Lack of sleep triggers cortisol and adrenaline, silently raising BP. European Heart Journal reports sleeping 6 hours night raises your BP risk by 1.7 times. Sleep better by avoiding blue light before bed, drinking warm tea or reading before sleep, practicing light meditation. 4. Increase potassium. Nature's counterbalance to sodium-potassium helps relax blood vessels, flush sodium, and reduce pressure. Good sources: bananas, sweet potatoes, pumpkin, spinach, low-fat yogurt. If you have kidney disease, consult a doctor before increasing potassium. 5. Meditate. Breathe deeply to relax your vessels. Just 10 minutes of daily meditation can lower BP by 4 to 5 millimeters of mercury. AHA 2022. Tips. Try the 4-7-8 breathing method. 4 inhale, 7 hold, 8 exhale. Combine walking and mindfulness for double benefits. Your body has spoken through symptoms. This video gave you the knowledge. Now it's your turn to rewrite your blood pressure story with action. And in the final part, let me remind you of this. Ignore symptoms. You lose time. Ignore action. You could lose your life. You've just learned the 10 silent signs of high blood pressure. Maybe you recognized a few: brief fatigue, a harmless headache, or a faint ringing in your ears. But today, you understand, it's not random. High blood pressure is terrifying not because it's loud, but because it's too silent. It doesn't knock, it doesn't shout, it waits for you to let your guard down. And one morning, it may strike, with a stroke, a lost vision, or a life-changing emergency. But you're here, you've listened, and you still have time to take control. Take action today for yourself and your loved ones. Monitor your blood pressure regularly. Watch for even the smallest symptoms. Follow the steps in this video. Share this message. Someone you care about might be silently at risk. If you found this video helpful, click like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. At Senior Health Guide, we're not just sharing knowledge. We're walking with you toward a healthier life every day. High blood pressure is not the enemy. If you learn to listen to it, don't wait until your heart has to scream for help. Start changing today. See you in the next video, where we continue to understand our bodies and live more proactively together.